Hello, everyone. Good morning. We're so honored to have you here with us this morning. We have shared a longer bio about Dr. Lana Edwards Santoro, so we're shorter one this morning. Dr. Santoro is a research professor with the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development at Boston University. She currently serves as co-principal investigator of the National Lead for Literacy Center and the lead of the Instruction and Intervention strand for the National Center on Improving Literacy. Dr. Santoro has been a long-term partner, collaborator, contributor to our work at Catton and our MTSS initiative in literacy. We are so honored and grateful to have her with us once again and to learn from her. And now I turn it over to Dr. Santoro.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. I appreciate the introduction and the welcome. Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. It's such a pleasure to be with you on our part 2 of core reading strategy instruction. I'm excited to hear what you have to share, and I will share a little bit as well. We'll begin the session with a short review. I just want to frame things, like center us, where we are and what content we're discussing. Then I'll turn it over to you. And we have, I think, 3 presentations I heard on deck today to share. Know we are a supportive audience. So when you get ready to queue up and share, we're just excited to partner with you. And really, I hope we can have an informality about it. It's not a high stakes situation. We just want to talk about these practices and learn from you what's working well, what isn't working well, and how we can problem solve. We'll do team presentations together, and then I will have a short conclusion ready, again, to tie things together, make us feel like we've had some coherence in the content shared. So to do my introduction, I'm going to get my PowerPoint launched. I will be showing you slides you saw in part 1, but I will do that in a way just to connect the dots here and set you up for some great presentations today and some sharing. So here we go. All righty. So just note that if you're interested in my PowerPoint, you can find this on the Google Drive using the link that my colleagues have been sharing in the chat. So this particular PowerPoint for part 2, which has some of the review content sequenced a bit differently, as well as some new, I think of it as like a professional learning community application. All of that is in the new PowerPoint, and the file name has a part 2 there to denote it from what we looked at in our first session. The other document I would love you to look at and just know supports this content is the IES practice guide focused on providing interventions to students in grades 4 through 9. It's a new practice guide, just we would say recently released or fairly recently released. It was a document I referenced in our first session, but I want to call it out today as seminal, key, important for you in this work, particularly as it comes to core intervention and building comprehension for students. It follows the framework that I've been discussing, and if you have time, it's a wonderful document to grab, look at, and use to support your work. Particularly, pay attention to recommendation number 3. That focuses on reading intervention strategies, exact content that we're talking about in these sessions. So to give you a little more support, and depending on how much time we have to close out the session, might be something I do take you back into and we look at a little bit as you move forward. So today, as you know, this is our part 2 session for core reading instruction. This will focus on your work, your team presentations on implementation, and some of the connecting the dots work that I've talked about. So again, the game plan for us today, I want to set some context. We'll move into team presentations. And then if we have time, we'll do some application around professional learning communities. But I will, at the very least, draw things together in conclusion so you have a coherence and can take content away and apply it as you move forward with this work. The learning outcomes over our part 1 and part 2 session include connecting assessment with your reading and writing instruction. Part of that work, if you're assessing through the lens of writing, is to practice and use scoring, a scoring approach. with an analytic rubric to be able to infer growth in the relationship to how students are doing on writing. I also want you to be able to start to pick out and identify specific strategies that support this work. And then finally, many of you have done that and are coming back, that implementation piece. So we are coming full circle. So to put us in context, to put us in a shared circle of understanding, if you will, I want you to know that we are talking about and centering this work on core reading strategy instruction within the context of multi-tiered systems of support. And so we are looking at, as the title of the session says, core reading strategies. So strategies that can be used to support student reading in the core. I also want to note that these strategies can certainly be used, as the practice guide on reading interventions for struggling readers suggests, to support some students as well who might require additional intervention. So you're looking at a set of strategies that, depending on how you apply them, really can give you mileage related to student impact. So yes, we're talking about core reading, but I didn't want to lose the opportunity to say what you're looking at here with our strategies can apply to that intervention for students too. These were the documents that I discussed with you in the last session, and I want to call out number 3. I want to call out number 2, the providing reading interventions for students in grades 4 through 9. That's number 2 on the right-hand side. Was released in March 2022, so relatively new for us in the field, a really great one to look at. All of these provide the evidence-based. So patent series is centered on research and evidence-based practices. We want to disseminate and discuss things that have worked for students in the research, things that have benefited them academically, strategies that have helped them grow in areas of reading and writing. And if you're interested in where that research comes from, the set of documents on the screen here do that. We provided them with our contents for session 1, so you have access to all of them. They're also very easy to find on the web as well. If you search titles for these documents, you'll find the PDF reports. So our big idea that we're working with across this session is that we want students to write about the text they read. We're talking about core reading instruction, but once we get to the secondary level, we cannot take apart reading and writing. That's the idea. As students are reading, to really help them understand what they're reading, writing needs to be involved. Whether you are teaching students at a word level, how to decode and understand the syntax of a sentence involves writing, as well as larger applications of comprehension. Writing, as some of us discuss, is the highest form of comprehension. And so we want to, though we talk about core reading instruction, make sure that that writing is part of it. And the whole idea there is because we are kids and our students demonstrate what they know through writing, right? Do they know how to decode that word? Well, they can write and spell that word. Do they know how to construct a sentence correctly with syntax in a meaningful way? We can have them write that sentence. And in our session 1, we talked about several comprehension strategies that involve and bridge that relationship. So a major goal of core reading instruction and writing is to help students derive content from text. Our drive at the secondary level is to help students understand that text. And I know, right, your state has a focus on text-based analysis. These are the skills. The strategies we're teaching are the skills that lead students to the work where they can observe, experiment, and really understand their text through analysis. The framework that we've been using for text analysis to help students understand the text is on the far right. Overall, there's a process of having kids read the text, then they write about the text. And once they have writing, they can edit and revise that writing to have additional clarity and meaning. We were staying and hovering on the far left-hand side of this process, having students read the text. But as I said, when they are reading the text, writing is involved. Looking at the strategies on the left-hand side, we want students to be able to read those words, right? To understand the words they read, figure them out, understand the content and the viewpoint of the text. To do that and really get in the text, highlighting and note-taking is used. And then finally, if I'm working with that text, I want to be able to summarize it. I want students to be able to convey the gist to me somehow. Connecting all of the bullets on the far left is asking and answering questions about the text, really engaging kids in content in an active way where question asking and answering drives and understanding the text. I really love to think of that as having students dialogue with the text to extract that meaning, right? So question asking and answering is part of it. So how did we approach this? We have a continuous improvement process at work, and I wanted to align what you are doing with Pennsylvania's model of continuous improvement, where we begin by figuring out what the problem is, what are students struggling with, where are the obstacles, then we figure out what to do. And that's the first point, by the way, of what I'll review in the session. Then it's implemented to the best you can, doing it and doing it well, and then figuring out how it worked, how you can make adjustments. So let me review the what is the problem and what are we going to do part, and then I'll turn it over to you. And in the presentations that will occur today, you all will share what you did, how you did it, and whether it worked. So let's get that. What is the problem? Figuring students out a little bit, and then talking about what your intervention options are based on understanding that problem. So this was the roadmap. This guided you through complex content when it comes to reading instruction for secondary students. So we talked about making a decision. Do your students need to understand the words they're reading? Is their reading difficulty at a word level? That their reading is so stilted, so halted, that they are caught up at a word level understanding for a variety of reasons. For example, maybe they're not even reading those words. They are not accessing the decoding and the connection to phonological and orthographic processing required for automatic and fluent reading. Maybe it's part of the problem there. Students are starting at the secondary level to encounter more sophisticated words. They're multisyllabic. They're multiple word parts, right, in those words. Maybe of that difficulty, they need explicit and direct instruction in figuring that out. Knowing the meaning of the word parts, so not just figuring out how to pronounce and say those and what those are, but connecting the word parts to meaning. Or maybe it is just a limited understanding of vocabulary, right? The background knowledge required to access the meaning of a word so the sentence makes sense, which then says to us the passage makes sense. So part of your decision was to consider, did your students have trouble with the understanding words part? Did you need to go down word level reading instruction? Did you need to explicitly teach vocabulary? That might have been where you started. For others, you might have tilted to understanding content. Maybe your students are successful or relatively successful, let's say, in understanding the words they read. Then we go down the content track. And with that content track, we sorted out different pathways. One pathway was to help support students in main idea identification. So for these students, they needed to understand the essence of the text, right? They needed to find in the text clues through highlighting potentially, maybe note-taking, to really get at basic level meaning, main idea identification, sorting the main idea out for details and not muddling those differences. Then for summarizing, the two we talked about are connected, right? Main idea is the identification of main idea detail. Summarizing is the use of and putting it all together. So summarizing means I take the main idea and detail that I identified and I put it within a holistic, pulling it all together way. Sometimes we call it the gist. But sharing a summary, putting it in with a beginning, middle, and end to really understand what is involved. And then finally, for students who might have all these things in place, but perhaps they're not expanding their ideas or connecting their ideas, or they're having trouble inferencing when they're reading, we go into the realm of supporting students in question asking and answering. Because it's through question and asking and answering that we are able to help students derive more content, find content with more depth. So for maybe some students, they stay at a very surface level. You see in their writing, they're not connecting their ideas, they're not expanding their content, they're not going further. That means that we've got to really think about how to support questioning and answering, asking and answering through strategy. So that was our roadmap, right? You had different pathways you could consider based on your student needs. And those pathways are based on an evidence-based model that from comprehension, the comprehension literature, that for kids to really understand text and be successful, they are constantly developing a mental model of what that text is. And it's built at a word level. Got to understand those words. That's why decoding and multisyllabic word reading is so important, right? And then we find those words in a sentence and we derive meaning from those sentences. And sentences in and of themselves hold meaning. A sentence is a story. A sentence can convey the main idea of something. Those sentences build overall and larger meaning when they're put into paragraphs, right? Or multi-paragraphs within the context of more complex text. So that is the model. And we are using these pathways to problem solve our way through it and identify, do students need to understand words? Do students need to understand content, and where along that continuum are they having trouble with that content? So quick review now, breaking up understanding words, understanding content. So we'll start with understanding words. I provided an implementation plan. If it was helpful to you, you could have used this if this was the pathway you were going. And with some suggestions for assessment, along with some intervention ideas related to explicit and systematic vocabulary instruction, if that sort of felt it was more vocabulary based, or going in the direction of explicit and systematic instruction to help students read those longer words, multisyllabic words, get at meanings, sort of the morpheme level instruction. So you had some choice within this pathway of how you could focus your efforts. Big idea, I want to connect. You can't have reading at the secondary writing level without writing. And this is why when we want students to read words, we want them to effortlessly decode and be able to identify what those words are, connect them to meaning, use those words in spoken language. But word use in writing is equally important, because word use in writing demonstrates, do I have a definitional and contextual knowledge of that word and what that conveys? Also, don't take for granted how word use can impact an essay and how we read and interpret its meaning. Word use connects to how a student focuses their essay. If they're not helping, they're not including words that help focus their efforts in writing vocabulary, the essay doesn't really hold, and it's not really connected. It doesn't have the pieces. Same with organization. Vocabulary in writing is key. For example, you have those words like first, next, and last, and transition words, and use of therefore. As part of that affects organization. And vocabulary is the icing on the cake for style and composition. So when we want kids to really speak with their voice, with their author's voice, to have tone in their writing, that style, that personality on paper, that's all vocabulary, that's all word use. So knowing that these are the things in a very big way that you're supporting, if you're going down the pathway of helping students understand the words, you're doing a lot of good work. It's yes, you're helping students read and understand those words, but it has implications for how students write. To take you into content understanding here, we discussed main idea in detail, with some intervention strategies for you that you could focus on. It might have just been general, explicit, and systematic instruction, or taking kids in and helping them extract main idea and details. We looked at how kids can better look at the text, highlight it, mark it off, and then note take from it. And there were also some skill builders as well. So maybe you've done that instruction already, but you need to get kids firmed up. We had some skill builders along the lines of title matching, headline matching is very similar, 3-2-1 strategy that embeds some of that main idea in detail as ways to practice what you've taught. Again, reading and writing connection, students comprehend what they read. That's all about getting the main idea of a text. If you don't have the main idea, you don't understand the story. And then students need to write with focus. Focus is the main idea. If there's no main idea, there's no focus in writing. There's no single controlling point. We had highlighting and why note-taking as well within this context, because I wanted to tell you how important, if you're teaching highlighting as a reading skill, why it helps writing. It helps writing because highlighting can be connected to note-taking. And the big thing I think we miss countless times is that when students have highlighting skills, they are better editors, they are better at revising their work. And so because we've often missed the boat on highlighting and teaching that, the edit revise process in writing is so difficult for students. So this is a big piece to revisit if you are interested in really helping support the edit revise process. If that's a thing for your kids, you might need to think, okay, I might need to teach highlighting and how to highlight when I'm reading text with my students. Note-taking is very similar in this way. It supports in writing the edit revise process. Note-taking is also planning and organizing, right? So when we plan and organize, that involves a note-taking skill. So all of this is connected, and why I'm saying you can't get away from reading and writing when we're talking about core reading instruction. So finally, almost finally, in understanding content is summarizing. So if you were looking down this pathway, there were some intervention strategies you can consider, some tools like summary charts or using the GIST strategy, maybe some prompt cards, and additional skill builders. So feeling you're coming into this, that I have my instruction, I feel good about my instruction, it was explicit and systematic, but I just need more. I just need to practice this more with my students. It's the practice piece. Skill builders were the option you could have gone down the road with. So summarizing, huge. Summarizing is one of the most effective strategies for building comprehension and for helping students understand what they read. It has one of the highest effect sizes in terms of research-based, evidence-based perspective. So if you want mileage on something, focus on summarizing because there is a payoff. By summarizing, students learn to understand what they read, they get the main idea, and just with writing, summarizing is so key. Summarizing supports understanding the text, but here's where it comes into play. Kids need to summarize when they edit revise, right? When they edit revise, I have to have some level of summary skill to communicate my revisions, or to understand my revision, or I have peer editing, I need to communicate that in a clear way to my peer or partner. That involves summarizing. So again, if the edit revise process is falling down, one place to go look at is summarizing. Then also looking at introductions and conclusions. Think about that for a minute and look at the bottom a graphic on the screen that's been added here. We summarize introductions. Conclusions are essentially a summary of what we wrote. And so if you have students who really just don't write strong introductions and conclusions, to what they've been writing, this is an area where you say, okay, introductions and conclusions are weak. I need to really look at summary and summary skill, both in reading and writing. Then here's my finally, that question asking and answering piece. If you went down that pathway, you're looking and your intention is to help kids build content, think and expand ideas, be able to make evidence-based connections to the text. This is all driven by skills in question asking and answering. I showcased the QAR strategy briefly, and then I did have some skill builders focused on making inferences and finding the evidence that we didn't have time to fully explore. So just to note that if we do have time to conclude, I have additional content on this area that I just gave a short focus in our part 1. So I could take this in depth as we conclude today. So anyway, this question asking and answering, so key, right? Because it helps us connect ideas and expand ideas in the text. And then for writing, if you have a student whose essays are very short and stilted, and they don't take that writing into a lot of detail, right? You can tell the passages are light on substance. Kids aren't really going anywhere with it. The writing is very basic. In terms of content, they might get low content scores on a rubric. Questioning helps with idea generation because questioning can prompt students to expand their ideas and connect ideas. It's related to my author's voice, actually, because internally, as a good writer, I need that author's voice and those questions to prompt me through my writing to expand my ideas. And then finally, and most importantly, I think, I'm asked a lot about how to help students find the evidence in their work and write about it. Questions are used there. Questions are used to help support finding the evidence. So that brings us here, our overall understanding of the pathways involved to support reading, core reading strategies. One is to take the pathway of supporting understanding words and drilling down either on vocabulary or helping students read and decode those words through multisyllabic instruction. The other way was through understanding content. And we looked at main idea, summarizing or question asking and answering, again, depending on the needs of your students. Going back to these charts to me, and why I wanted to stack them all together at the introduction of part 2 today, they're almost like hints. These are hints. There are ways to guide you in assessment, and you're thinking about what students' strengths are, what are weaknesses. And so you can look at these charts in a way where you can say, do my students comprehend text? How could I assess that? Is that all right? Are they connecting ideas in reading and in writing? Are they discussing this within the classroom? If I ask them questions, can they expand their ideas? These are all here to help you navigate where you want to go and where you feel instruction and intervention would be most beneficial. So that is why I wanted to kind of stack them up like that, and emphasize that reading, writing relationship at the secondary level, and give you that guidance, show you that guidance on where to go. So what I've talked about really are the first 2 parts of the continuous improvement process. It is about applying, thinking about what the problem is. And then I showed you some interventions, right? Show you some interventions about what you're going to do about it. And now I've queued it up. I hopefully set you up for a good, successful discussion about what you did. And then a reflection on, did it work or not? And we can problem solve through that, because, and I want to be very, very honest as we move into team presentations. We know what works in research, but in research, we have controlled environments to study the effects of our strategy instruction with students. You live and work in real world contexts, right? With demands that far exceed what we often could try to control in a research environment. So there is problem solving to do and to help figure out how to support you in your implementation. So we know what works. It does work with kids. We've got to help translate to practice. And that's what we're going to be talking about next. So I set up a presentation template, and teams coming in, you're welcome. Again, if you haven't used this closely and you're just going to share work, great. This was intended to kind of help guide you in format. And we talked about just coming on, when you come on, introduce your team in school. Love to learn a little bit more about you. And for me, love to know a little bit where you are in Pennsylvania, so I can get a sense of your Pennsylvania geography a little bit. Then you are going to identify the problem, so to help us on our map, right, our implementation map, know where you headed to understanding words or content. And then within content, was it main idea, summarizing your question, asking and answering. You're then going to identify what you were going to do. So this is the strategy we used, and then discuss how it went. How did it go? If you have any data, we'd love to see that data, and any visuals of your instruction is great. In our discussion with you, we'd love to know and help you think about, so know what you're thinking about in terms of next steps, but also know what you hope to do as you take this intervention further. So this is it. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to first give a pause to see if there are any questions about how I connected that introductory content. So anything that would be helpful to you as you reflect on this. And we're going to get ready here to cue you all up to share. So this will be a moment of transition in our session. Let me know if you have questions. I'll also let my patent colleagues kind of help guide us as we transition to some presentations. And I'm thrilled for those teams who will be able to share some of their work.
I'm muting them.
All right, there we go. I think we have it all set up. Can you hear me okay? Okay. All right. So what we looked at, I'm sorry, you need to turn the, I think, volume up on your computer. All right. What we took a look at were the ideas, context clues, using Save Mean Matter summarizing, which is an initiative that we'll talk about a little bit more, but an initiative that was set out for our district at the start of the school year. Are you all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So my colleague is Jerry Bonenberger. She teaches 6th grade ELA and reading, and 7th grade academic strategies, which is a course that was designed here, I'm going to say probably close to 15 or 16 years ago, that has a focus on reading. But we call it academic strategies as it also focuses on content vocabulary and any type of vocabulary that would go into content areas across the board. My name is Emily Pisco. I teach 7th grade English. This is my 20th year here in the district. Jerry and I are both on our leadership team in our middle school. And so we were invited by Melissa Arafai, our supervisor, to be able to attend this webinar. And we're really grateful for that opportunity. You want me to keep going?
No,
Okay.
sorry, we have like audio feedback, so we're trying to work that through. You have to mute and come back in. So our school, Whitehall Copley School District, is located in north of Philadelphia on the borders of the city of Allentown. That's right. All of our schools are located on one campus, and that serves approximately 4,300 students each day. Our school fluctuates at around 1,000 in terms of population. Our middle school consists of grades 6 through 8. 7th grade students have both English and academic strategies, as Emily said, and that is to compensate because in 6th grade they have a double period of ELA and reading, and so that's kind of a way of transitioning them through 7th grade with that. And then students go to reading support every other day in academic strategies.
So the areas that we were addressing, we were looking at students using context clues to build understanding of vocabulary. We wanted to take a look at how building their vocabulary will increase their student comprehension, and then how that will impact their writing. And so that was the focus that we chose to take a look at since our last webinar.
Yeah, we find that vocabulary is one of those things that constantly pops up as a weakness. So
in our content and curriculum, we don't have a specific vocabulary curriculum.
Okay. Yeah, so we have the number of students, we had some students that we had in common that we focused on, and we also gave some input on students that we didn't have in common, and we showed different examples of that. After reading an assigned text, we had the students write a summary. For Emily's classes, it was A Christmas Carol. And for my class, we read a nonfiction article, Why Do We Like to Be Scared, from Scope Scholastic. The students were presented with no pre-writing prompt, that they weren't given basically anything in our first summary. They were just told, we read it together, summarize it. Students were then presented with no vocabulary, which we usually run through vocabulary, especially with texts like these. And then we had students peer review another student summary for repeated words. What I did was I had them go through, and I'll show you an example of that, where students went through and peer reviewed based on multisyllabic words, repeated words. They did like a brief using some of the resources that were provided in the first session, what is expected in a summary, and we found that was pretty eye-opening for them. So what I had them do when they were peer reviewing, after they did their initial summary, is I had them highlight in yellow any word that their writer that they were reviewing repeats, other than common articles and also common prepositions too. They highlighted in purple any words with 3 or more syllables that your writer uses, that the writer used, and then they if they were repeating and had 3 or more syllables, they highlighted in yellow and bold them. As I said, the kids it created quite a discussion in our class, because it was eye-opening for them to see. They didn't realize how many things they repeat. And I pointed out to them, I said, you can probably tell most teachers in the school what their repeating word is. Everybody's got one of those repeating words. I said, so it's interesting to understand and to be aware of those repeating words. So they were surprised by that. They were also surprised that they didn't use more multisyllabic words. They thought that they had, and I said, well, that again goes with the process and writing and considering the process and beefing up some of the things that you're doing. So they it helped them be aware of maybe some bad habits and shine a spotlight on those bad habits. This was just an example of the resource that I used the last time. I found the summarization prompt card probably out of these two things, the most, and even though it was only 3 questions, it gave them the most information in terms of briefly going through, expectations and what they should be looking for. And they discussed these things. A peer reviewer went over these things and discussed it with their writer.
Okay, so what we decided that we were going to, again, focus on was looking at explicit and systematic vocabulary instruction. So what words were we pulling? How are we teaching them? And making those words that, were at a higher level, more sophisticated in terms of what their word choice is going to be when they got to writing about their reading. And then we also wanted to take a look at their ability to use that vocabulary in conjunction with what is my main idea, and looking at that main idea identification. And of course, building off of that into making inferences and finding their evidence. So this is what our explicit vocab instruction looked like. And so as I mentioned at the very beginning, one of our initiatives as a district is Say Mean Matter. And this is something that's happening between grades 3 through 8 right now. And what we're having the students do is take a look at texts and be able to pull text evidence, be able to tell us what it means. So start to build that inference, and then matter by connecting it to a larger piece. And so when we talked about, when you were talking about vocabulary in November, we were like, this fits exactly with what we wanted, you know, what we've been talking about. And so we took this idea of that explicit vocab instruction, and we decided to go across and say, okay, so where do we see this word within our text? Okay, now looking at the context clues, what does it mean? What do you think the word means, right? Why does this word matter in relationship to our understanding of the text? So not that we're just pulling words, but we're looking at that deeper connection for why is this word so important in the overall ability to understand what we're reading.
We're also seeking ways to make this, you know, district-wide initiative something that could be used in all content areas. And this kind of sparked some ideas for us in terms of using the vocabulary. And if you see the words that this was the one that I used for my article. If you see the words that we use, we don't commonly hear 7th graders use these words, and especially in their writing. So these were definitely words that will help would help them in terms of understanding and then detailing their summary of their complex text.
So we also gave them this resource for how to use context clues in being able to figure out the definition of a word prior to looking at the dictionary definition. Do you want to speak to this?
We use in academic strategies, I guess, an alternating day class. So I have them in academic strategies every other day, and for our novel studies on the alternating days. So we use in academic strategies scholastic scope as the core of our curriculum. And what I did with this organizer is I always judge them a little bit. And so I added that, try to maybe incorporate the vocabulary words in your organizers. That's going to help you in transitioning that into your writing. We gave them some sentence starters. So these were questions that were focused on summarizing this particular article. And we also talked about the fact that there are general questions that we can consider when summarizing an article, but because we have this wonderful resource that has a focus, we're going to utilize this.
Okay, so we had our students write summaries. So we took the initial summaries, we had scored them, and then we went through explicit vocab instruction, and then we had them do a second summary. And we were able to do a comparison between what we saw their growth being stemming from that explicit vocab instruction. So in English class, we were reading A Christmas Carol at the time. So the initial summary was done on stave 1 of A Christmas Carol, and the second summary was done on stave 2 of A Christmas Carol. And of course, as we were reading it, they were working on comprehension questions alongside the text, which is something that we always do. Otherwise, the text gets a little unwieldy for them. So they need somewhere to be able to take those notes and come back to a reference point.
And academic strategies, we started off with a shorter article that they read, that they summarized in their initial summary. And then we went on to, and they were both nonfiction texts. And then we went on to a longer text, and we read both texts together. They were told that they were going to summarize and what we needed to focus on. So we went over that a little bit, provide text evidence. We're always I always push them to support what they're saying with text evidence and cite them. So what I did too is I used an organizer from Scope that I added to where it pulled out the central idea, pulled in key details that would support that from the text, and I took it further to have them paraphrase those key details and those direct quotes right on that organizer to take that into the summary.
So when we were looking at what we were looking for, our implementation look fors, we really felt like we hit a lot of things here in this very short amount of time. So we took a look at that progress of the pre-summary and the post-summary, or this first summary and the second summary, the idea of the explicit vocab instruction, having students writing about the text they read, which we both do frequently anyway, but just doing it in a different way, we saw a change in their writing, including the skill builders, and then giving students a lot of opportunity to kind of assess their writing and to talk about text and to write about the text. So what went well was the explicit vocabulary instruction. I had students verbally answering questions in class and using their vocabulary as they were answering the questions in class and having a conversation. And so I would say that went really well. We saw the vocabulary showing up within the summaries, and they were using the words correctly. Yeah. They weren't just like plopping the word in. It was clear that they demonstrated the knowledge of how that word was supposed to be used. Mm-hmm. What didn't go as well were some uncontrollable factors. We were doing this between Thanksgiving and Christmas break, and at that point we had a field trip. We had 2 different assemblies. We had all kinds of
kids out for band, kids out for chorus, and
kind of catching up, making sure all the kids were caught up. So that was probably, and that's teaching, and so that's always part of the uncontrollable factor of teaching. So taking a look at the data that we collected, we took the 4-point rubric and we broke it into 2 pieces to do a comparison. And so what we saw in the comparison of purpose and organization is we saw a growth from summary 1 to summary 2 that was about I think it was like around 58% growth from that first summary to the second summary. And so when Jerry and I were talking about this, we were looking at it and we're like, well, that's, a difference between basic and proficient. If we're going to look at that in terms of language, of where we want our students to be moving towards that proficient line of being able to write proficiently and being able to use that vocabulary. And so we did see that. And then we do have 2 examples. So I'll let Jerry talk about these.
So this is sample 1 from one of our students, and as you can see, it is a list. We don't get a whole lot of detail. There are just a lot of facts about fear. The article was about fear and why we like to be scared, but the summary aspect of this did not come together. We see a lack of transitions. They don't mention specifics from the article. So, in terms of the whole organization and elaboration, we weren't seeing that.
So this is the
purpose and organization.
So this is the same student, but this is their second summary that they completed after the vocab instruction and the organization.
I see some expressions, and those are the expressions that I had too, because it was mind blowing, like the detail that we saw in terms of their focus, in terms of their elaboration of details, in terms of their the finding of details that actually supported strongly what we were the central ideas that we were trying to support. So I think that and the use of vocabulary, and using it, as Emily said correctly, it was amazing, and we were like, whoa, and we were like, whoa, in a lot of the summaries. So it was just really a matter of focusing them and having them focus on that more complex vocabulary and be clear that they all understood it. Because with my organizer for the vocabulary, I had them work with partners, so they could bounce ideas off of each other in terms of doing the same mean matter, and the conversations that they had during that was interesting as well. So I think that for me, we always struggle with vocabulary and central idea, and this hit those things that squarely nail on the head, because this, you can see that we went all the way to a 4 in terms of this person, and it's evident that's where this should be.
Looking at the second part, we saw similar growth in terms of the evidence and elaboration. So again, right around that 50, I think it was like a 53% shift. but again, moving from that, basic to that proficient writing that we're looking for. And so this is one of my examples, and this was a different student, but their first summary, and you can see I highlighted it, I underlined in black a vocab word that we had discussed, which was misanthropic, but then everything in blue is kind of general. So if you are not familiar with A Christmas Carol, this wouldn't necessarily get you there. And so while, yeah, it kind of borders on summarizing, it's very, very general. And then after the explicit vocab instruction, accurately using words like inquiry and solitary, and being able to really showcase for somebody what's happening in Stave 2 for Ebenezer Scrooge. The other thing I want to point out, which I found to be interesting in most of my summaries and in Jerry's, is that students even started their summaries more specifically and differently than they did in their originals. So even going into saying the title of the novel, stating that we're in Stave 2, those specifics really up the ante. And so we were looking at something that was very different. And so we were thrilled with, the progress that we saw.
With their focus, with how specific they were about things, because we fight all the time with them starting writings off with pronouns and trying to get them away from that. And it was amazing the detail that we saw from the beginning of the summary all the way through.
Okay, so our next steps, we are in on the continuation of explicit vocabulary instruction, starting. I decided I'm going to jump to the last slide and then I'll come back to this for a second. Taking a look at academic vocabulary for students, because so one of the things that I'm teaching right now is the memoir. And usually I will define what a memoir is, but this time I decided to take those, that definition of a memoir and break it down into what are the qualities of a memoir? What are those vocabulary words? I did explicit instruction on the vocabulary words. I had them say the word. I had them read the definition. We rewrote the definition in our own words. We looked at examples. We located what's the perspective, what are the assumptions the writer's making. And then they wrote their own memoir using those qualities. And then we went to a memoir in our text, Polar Dream, and they then had to use our Say Need Matter organizer using that vocabulary to prove that it was a memoir. So I just feel like that explicit vocabulary has really created this moment, because the students, when they're talking about the memoirs now, they're using terms like perspective and scope and, where's the precise language. And so those are things that have, really kind of been a game changer in the classroom. So what do we want to do next? We want to develop more resources. We need to get the word out to the rest of our department and then our building. And that's what we have for you today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm like coming out of my seat here with enthusiasm for the hard work that you did and how you took the content we had discussed and really ran with it. This is a really, really stellar, brilliant presentation, and the work that you did to move those kids. What I want to say, despite those obstacles, right? Despite your obstacles of that weird timing, we were over the holidays, it wasn't optimal. It wasn't that you could see with these students, you still got the growth you did despite that, right? And for writing instruction, it's hard to move the needle and really see that growth in the time that you had looked at it. And I wanted to come in and I was a little cautious about what teams might have found, because if you're looking at writing instruction, it's hard to sometimes pick it up within the span of time that we were looking at, but you did. And the impact is dramatic for those kids. I just so thrilled, and you all just like make my day, really. Like,
well, thank you
for me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your hard work and really thinking about those details. And one thing, actually two things. One thing is, I love how you looked at this through the lens of understanding words, and that you took that through, right? You took that through the pathways and made it connect across your intervention. So where you were doing two very powerful things, You were focusing on that within the context of explicit and systematic vocabulary instruction, but you were driving it through summarizing, which I said it has huge payoff. And so to me, you reinforce that point I wanted to bring today too, which I'm selfishly excited about, is that by looking at understanding words, you hit all these qualities within writing. Focus improves when you have good vocabulary, because the vocabulary you're using helps focus focuses it. Your content improves because vocabulary enriches the content kids are talking about. The organization improves because content in a domain area will drive that organization. Style improves because, as you were pointing out, they're now using different sort of intro sentences to build their ideas. That style improves because now they have the language to convey it. And conventions can improve because now I have more sophisticated words that work within the content of the sentences. So that I'm over the moon, really. And my last thing was I'm just impressed on how you had kids dig in. That was my other note of glowing reinforcement. You had kids dig in and look at their writing, right? You had them early on. I love that you had them highlight and look for repeated words and the vocabulary where they could really self-assess and get in on it. And the peer review also you should be commended for, because I've seen again and again in classrooms where that piece is dropped because we have concerns about behavior issues, the time it takes to get kids partner up, and that you went in that and had the kids really look at their writing. There's so much I'm really just happy about, makes my day. But I want my patent colleagues to also, I know they see other things too in what you've done than I do. So I'd love them to also share too. But thank you for starting us off like this.
I'll jump in, Emily and team. I am equally all the things that Lana said, but to echo that, secondary multi-tiered systems of support are just hugely needed for kids, right, as we continue services and supports from elementary, but rely so heavily on formative assessment. And that's exactly what you did. You took an evidence-based practice, explicit vocabulary instruction, and then formatively made changes over the course of these 8 or 9 weeks to get this, short-term, but really sustainable outcome as you move forward and spread the word and the practices to your friends and family. So on that note, I just wanted to just indicate in the chat that you are looking for what are those tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 words at the secondary level that are aligned to the standards that no matter what discipline or content area you're teaching, we can all simultaneously reinforce and get into long-term memory permanently, right? And then we see it in writing and enhance comprehension because vocabulary is so predictive. And I put in the chat word generation. Lana did mention it the last time we got together, but it is free. And ironically, Lana teaches through Boston University and works through Boston University, but that's where all the studies were conducted with the Boston Public City Schools initially. And we don't have a whole lot of studies on the impact of what you're doing on long-term vocabulary and comprehension outcomes, but WordGen did offer that to the field. And so it is appropriate for kids in middle school. It is appropriate to use across content area teachers, and kids will be getting the exposure to those words every day. You don't have to follow, you can work on your own implementation, but it would be a way to kind of say, what do we do with this momentum now? And how do we convince, our colleagues who sometimes are otherwise difficult to convince that this would really be a valuable kind of concerted effort. So I put that in there for you just to look at, even if you just want to look at the words, that word generation kind of uses, that would give you a sense of what are some words that we didn't even think about that we probably should reinforce, and you can continue to do it the way you're doing it. Just wanted to offer that. Congrats. This was excellent. You're a model secondary team, and we can't thank you enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, just as a reminder, everyone, as you are doing your presentations, to make sure that you do upload those to the link. I'm sure that we can have access to your wonderful work after this time. Is there a second team that would like to go next? Forest Hills or City Charter?
City Charter can go next.
Awesome. Thank you for volunteering.
Sure. So give me a second to make sure I'm sharing my screen correctly. First, it doesn't want to let me. We use Google everything here, so Zoom is a foreign entity. Let's see. All right, I think this is going to work. Let's see. Okay. So now I can't get over to the other thing. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Take your time. Just, yeah, get yourself set up. Take your time. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, it just
Yeah.
doesn't want to let me click on my other tab here. There we go. Now can you
Perfect.
see your, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
thank you. All right, so.
Do you want to mute? All right, hi, everybody. We are.
Yeah, I think if you're in the same room, everybody has to mute but the person speaking. Is that possible? Yeah.
All right, we'll try this. Can you unmute if I get back in?
I'm unsure if you've started yet, but we're not hearing anybody yet if you've started.
All right, how about
Sorry.
now?
That's good. Yeah.
All right,
I
sorry.
think it's good.
Okay, so we're going to talk about what we did with explicit and systematic vocabulary instruction at City Charter High School. And the four of us that worked on this endeavor was Angela Welch, who's one of the assistant principals and the ed manager for the school. My name's Josh Hanna. I'm the director of special ed. Beth Baranowski is here. She's a looping support, learning support teacher and a team facilitator. And Christine Watson-Smith is our reading specialist and ESL program coordinator. Just a little bit about City High. We're an open enrollment public charter school in downtown Pittsburgh. We celebrated our 20th anniversary last year after being initially founded by Dr. Richard Wertheimer and Mario Zinga, both former teachers in the Pittsburgh public schools. And we enroll from not just Pittsburgh neighborhoods, but a lot of towns and districts in Allegheny County and outside of Allegheny County. Some things that are unique to City High is that we loop. So our core teachers, including our learning support special ed teachers, we'll start with the 9th grade class and loop with them for all 4 years before returning to 9th grade. So we have a variety of teaching experience. Some people are starting their first loop. Some people are starting their 4th loop. We also have a year-round trimester schedule. So we are in session from September through November. And the students are off in December, as is the staff. We come back for trimester 2, January through March. Students are off in April. Staff is off for a smaller portion of April. And then we finish trimester 3, May through July, and we're off in August. We do have it's business casual, but it is a strict dress code for both students and staff to help prepare them for life after high school. We do have strict attendance standards where and students could fail a class if they miss more than 7 unexcused or teacher or parent excused. We only accept medical excuses. And we are focused, our mission is on academic and workforce skills. We actually formally assess workforce skills to prepare students for life after high school. In addition, every student must complete a 13-week internship outside of City High, which we set up. We have 2 full-time internship managers as a graduation requirement. And we're in the 2nd year of piloting our 4+ calendar, which came out of COVID. Prior to COVID, we had obviously longer school year with the trimesters. We also have a longer school day. So to focus on student and staff well-being, we started switching to the 4+ model last year, and we're staying there this year. That's classes 8 to 4, Tuesday through Friday. No classes, no students on Mondays, but they can come to the buildings on 2 of the Mondays every month for extracurricular activities or additional support. Staff are in the building those 2 Mondays a month and off the other 2. We have over 550 students average. Right now we're closer to 570 from 20 neighborhoods in the city. We are a Title I school. We do have a big focus on co-teaching, where sometimes our classes have 60 students, but 4 teachers in them. So we average about a 10-to-1 student-teacher ratio. 54 of our 90 or so teaching faculty loop, and we have a 94% graduation rate.
Okay, so, whoops, sorry. Okay, so we identified one of our problems as underneath the understanding words category, specifically word learning and word learning strategies. And we know that this is a deficit that was compounded by the pandemic and virtual learning, especially for our incoming students, because since we are a charter high school, we get students from many different districts and many different educational experiences. And so we sort of have to get them all on the same page once they get here, which can be complex. So the intervention that we focused on was explicit and systematic vocabulary instruction and a routine of putting that in place. We actually started this probably the year prior to the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, this initiative was completely lost. There were many other things that it took priority and that our teachers had to focus on. So it sort of went by the wayside. And now we are revisiting and restructuring in hopes of, making it bigger and better and more lasting than it was before. Okay, so one of the things that we have is a cultural literacy class. So our English classes and history classes are taught together. So we do not have a set curriculum that we use. We create the curriculum in-house. It's, since we've been open for 20+ years, it's an evolving thing. And a lot of our curriculum is based around whole novels that correlate with the historical topics that we are focusing on. So what we did is we took our cultural literacy books and we created a vocabulary cycle with each of them that ties in words from the books that are also connected to the historical concepts that are happening as well. So the way that we're focusing on it is that we identify all the words first, and we chunk them into 3 or 4 different cycles. We pre-teach the words before the kids access them when they get to the book, so that they already are familiar with them. They've already started, playing with them and utilizing them. And then when they're getting to the use of them in the novel, and then in preceding or subsequent assignments, then they're already familiar with it too. So on this screen, it sort of shows our vocabulary overview. So there's a document for 9th, 10th, and 11th grade that has the novel, the pages, the words, the activities that we do for each cycle, and then the links are all there. The second picture on this shows an example of a vocabulary cycle for weeks 1 and 2 of The Other Westmore, which was a book that we were doing actually pre-pandemic in Cultural Literacy 9. So we give them the word and the part of speech. We give them the context that it appears in the literature. We give them a student-friendly definition that we agree on because, as you guys all know, sometimes the definitions that they uncover are just as complicated as the words themselves. And then we give them an instructional sentence that they can easily latch onto. We try to make them, applicable and sometimes comical, something that's going to stick. And then they rate their understanding. Then there's always an initial activity that's done. So that's the last picture on this slide. This is the introductory activity. It's a peer conversation, asking questions, utilizing the words where they're going back and forth. Each cycle has at least usually around 5 activities, the last one being the writing activity where they're sort of connecting everything and then also tying the writing back into the book. I think, okay, so what we found is that, I think I might have skipped a slide. Let me go. Oh, maybe not. Okay. So what we found is that the students being exposed to a variety of vocabulary in meaningful ways was really positive. The connection to the curriculum and the literature really helped them, I think, understand some of the more complex topics that we were talking about. Students liked it. We tried to make the vocabulary activities, engaging, interactive, and different each time. The routine was established and they did well with that. What we feel didn't go as well is the measurement. So we had a very short time to do this because we went on break at the beginning of December and didn't come back until the beginning of January. So there was a whole month of this process where we were not in session. So I think that going forward, our measurement needs to change. So this is sort of where we were at. Did it work? We're saying yes and no. So ultimately, at the end of each of the cycles, the students were taking an assessment that included vocabulary words. These are 2 examples of questions that were on there. The students did get desirable scores. So 80 to 90% of the students scored proficient on these vocabulary assessments, but we, due to the lack of instructional time and also due to not having a pre-screener for some of these, we assume that this is positive because of the results, but we can't say that with 100% confidence. So we did do, 3 different examples. The one was from syllabus vocabulary, which actually happened prior to this whole professional development. And then the other 2 were from the vocabulary from the novel. This is happening. We use data from 9th grade for the graphs, but this is happening in 10th and 11th grade, as I said, as well. So this was an example of a 10th grade writing activity for cycle 1 of Night, which was the novel that they were reading at the time. So, the students are doing a really good job of understanding, incorporating, starting to use the words both in their writing and in their discussions in class. So how we're going to continue things is that we are hoping to reframe and reemphasize our vocabulary initiative. While we're piloting this in cultural literacy, we've actually talked about the model in different content areas as well. So we're hoping that this becomes something that moves beyond just the classroom, the call-it classroom in our school. And then we need to find a way to track the classroom data to monitor effectiveness in a more comprehensive way than what we did this particular time. We are also doing training for more teachers. So we're doing more reading instruction, specifically starting with our learning support teachers, and then we'll move on from there. And then as a school overall, we're utilizing data for more targeted skill lessons across the content areas based on STAR data, in-house assessments, anecdotal things, because we know that our students have, as many students right now do, have a lot of needs, both with vocabulary, reading, writing, math, all kinds of things. So we're sort of looking at this as how we can help students across different contents and different grade levels. And that's where we're at for now.
Fabulous. I love where you're at and what you were able to do, again, in this sort of short window with disrupted time. We were over that holiday hump. And you were trying to implement this intervention. So I am, again, deeply grateful for your efforts to meet those challenges and put to work that explicit and systematic vocabulary routine. It's really huge. So I also want to tell you, I'm out of my seat and very excited for the work you did. I think to commend you for getting in there and creating those identifying those vocabulary words, drawing those out of the literature cycles that you teach, and defining with student-friendly definitions, sort of taking the care to do that work across the novel cycle that you have in place is huge. And I know that's time-consuming. That work to do student-friendly definitions on the surface, you think, oh, that's great. That's what, but it does take time and it takes discussion, right? To fine tune and really get at those usable definitions that you want to incorporate. So great work here and great start. And I think I'm interested into what my patent colleagues say. My sense is with the data, I think it's time in this case. To build that systematic and explicit instruction in with consistency, right, without the disruptions, and to see how that data improves. You are bringing it into writing, which would be my other suggestion. I think to see a growth in vocabulary, you do want to push students to be able to use those definitions, write sentences with those words, include them in summarizing. It seems like you've got that in place. So that would be my suggestion, is really to look carefully on that use piece and where that's coming out, how much practice students get with articulating and putting those words in their language and conversation. It's the use piece that might kind of tip you over the edge a little bit with some of that data. It sounds like you're doing, but that would be, I would look at that very closely to help really promote it. I love that you're going content academic wide with it too. Like you've got now a systematic routine that can be applied. Yes, we have vocabulary in math. We need to look at it in content areas. We need to look at it in the novel work that you do in the literature classes and in English. So yeah, I'm excited. You've done well. And I'll let my patent colleagues kind of chime in too about what they heard.
I was going where Lena was going with in this world, assessment drives everything. And so you were mentioning your vocabulary pre-test and post-test, I believe. And so with your trimester schedule, Word Generation does offer a really nice vocabulary test. And we've had our teams use it pre-post like you did. But with your schedule, you could even think about doing fall, winter, and spring to keep informing the systematic and systemic teaching of these words explicitly, and then like Lena was saying, looking for them formatively. And so I think the assessment piece, if you did it 3 times a year, would just keep that momentum going, and so you'd be in a nice position. I just offered again the link to our live binder, not so much the site, the Word Generation site, but our live binder, because the vocabulary tests are in there. And again, you could take a look at the words that they teach over the course of their series, but you could just use those tests as another kind of step in this direction to making things more systematic and systemic. I'm going to actually find the tab that it's under for you, because these live binders are a little scary. They're a little overwhelming, so I'll get that for you. But right in agreement with what Lena said. Thank you.
Yeah, I just would like to add that, as Dr. Collins is putting those pre-tests and post-tests in the chat, that we also have that Word Generation live binder that Dr. Pencaster has put in the chat as a support to you as you're developing your vocabulary emphasis, and then also how you can integrate that into writing, because Word Generation has a really strong writing piece as well. Anybody else from our team before we move on to our next presenter?
Yeah, no, fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing that.
All right, so I think we have Forest Hills. Is Forest Hills ready?
Hi, we are.
Awesome. Feel free to share when you're ready. While they're getting set up, I just wanted to thank everybody for spending the time to put those glows and grows in there. I know you all have put some great effort into this mini series, and it's really wonderful to get that feedback from our peers. So thank you for continuing to add those grows and glows to the slide. We have slide 4 for Forest Hills coming up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this slideshow. Beautiful.
Sorry, our screen it froze on us here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we are Forest Hills Junior Senior High School. Our building is 7 to 12. What we decided to do for our implementation was to use WordGen over the 3-week period. We felt that this would be the best way to make sure it would be as much data as we possibly could analyze and collect in such a short period of time. And our goal was to increase student vocabulary usage and strategies. So our principal is Rebecca Roberts. She's here with us. I'm Olivia Baker. I'm 8th grade ELA.
I'm Matt Brohart. I'm ESL.
I'm Nancy Fagan, and I am 7th and 8th grade learning support. I'm Julianne Pachunik, and I am 9th through 12th grade learning support.
I'm Jennifer Raptosh, 7th and 8th grade reading.
I'm Kim Shaw, instructional technology specialist.
And I'm Lori Yevchak. I'm the English Language Arts Department Chair.
We're going to turn our computer quick so the light's not glaring.
Yeah, now you can see the screen. Okay, so in our school, our demographics are, I don't know, here. So we're a Title I school. We have.
I'm gonna just interrupt real quick. I think when you turned the computer, you might be standing far from the microphone. We hear like a little bit, but it's faint. Yeah, thanks.
Is that better? Okay. She said that's better.
So 7th grade, we have 134 students, 8th grade, 118. And that's really a typical kind of range for us. Our class of sophomores this year is pretty big, but we've had movements up to like the 160.
Okay, we're still gonna have to adjust your mic. We can just barely hear you. I apologize to interrupt. We actually can't hear you. We hear you, but we can't understand anything that you're saying. So anything you can do to get closer to your mic or position, it's okay. And thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Our school, I couldn't quite hear. We're in rural Stedman. Our big event this year is a new Ranger mascot. So we haven't had one in 40 years. So this year, that was our big goal for the year. We started the year off with that. We also had a new schedule change for the junior high and high school. So we separated, we are in one building, 7 through 12. For 5 years, we went on one schedule. This year, we separated into 2 different schedules. The junior high runs on a 7-period day, while the senior high runs on an 8-period day with a built-in study hall activity period. This involves club meetings and different activities that the students would need to meet for. 7th and 8th grade at this point has 1 activity period a week that allows study hall and club meetings to happen during that time. The challenges that we faced, of course, was the new schedule learning curve for all teachers and students. During this time, of course, as with everybody else, the time period between Thanksgiving and Christmas and the schedule changes and interruptions, we had 2 snow days in there as well. What this schedule change does do for us, many new opportunities to build a better program for our students, which involved 2 ELA classes to be presented to the students in 7th and 8th, as well as 2 math classes in 7th and 8th grade. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, that's perfect. It's great.
It's much better. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so our problem identifies student difficulty understanding words, word learning strategies. So as everybody else, we were tackling this as a team. What we did, as Olivia said, is we went with the WordGen organization. So I presented the text to these students in the reading class. Olivia, our ELA teacher, did it in English, and then our other teams did it with science and math. So what this allowed us to do was have explicit and systematic vocabulary instruction, as well as multisyllabic word reading routine and explicit and systematic morpheme instruction. We put flip charts in each of the classrooms that the students would see. So every classroom that they entered, these words were in front of them at some point throughout the day, or all day actually. Okay, so the explicit instruction and practice of the focus words, as I said, I presented it in the reading class. At first, we took a pre-test on Monday before the students had any instruction or working with these words. So they took the pre-test to see where we started as a basis. After this, the next day they came in, we would present the definition. They would use morphology to break down the words, to get the root words, the prefixes and suffixes. And then I gave them explicit instruction on the definition of the word. They would then go to their science, math, and history classes to work with those terms, as well as ELA would work with those definitions all week. The following day, they would come into reading and we would apply it with a question that they would discuss. It was a hot topic, so they became invested in it quickly and had a lot of thoughts and opinions. They were required to use that word while they were discussing the topic at hand.
It helps them study.
So as you can see, this was what they used for the turn and talk. So they were presented with a question. Each of those focus words then presented another question that they needed to discuss.
Okay, so when we looked at the students' writing samples, we assessed it by measuring the maturity level in their writing, as well as we looked for them using those words that was introduced in WordGen. So of course, those 5 words does follow the maturity, but we also looked at other words the student used. So you can see this sample. We went through and we circled all of the words that had 7 or more letters. And we had a total of 76 words in this student sampling. We listed all the words that they used and then found that this specific sample had a 21% maturity. We did break down some samples from learning support classes as well as just general 8th grade classes to kind of get an overall view. This was one of the better choices, so we picked this one to show you how we broke it down. We didn't do this with all of them, but again, we sampled examples from all different classes that we had, and we looked at their maturity. Okay, so there were a couple of different things that went really well. The students seemed to really enjoy WordGen overall because of its composition of lessons across the content areas and their growing familiarity throughout the week, being able to use it in not only ELA and their secondary reading courses, but also math, science, and history. For our learning support students, we were able to make accommodations on their pre-test, post-test, and writing samples. So rather than using all 5 of the WordGen words per week, they would use 3 out of 5. And then we also utilized Canvas, which is our district kind of study site. Is that a good way to explain it? Learning management system. And so what we did there, what Kim did was to set up a WordGen page with all of the teachers across all content areas with each lesson for the week so that the teachers could import each specific lesson as needed. And Canvas really made our collaboration much more succinct and a lot easier to kind of go through. I think like everyone's kind of mentioned, what didn't go so well was within the time frame. It was really hard to implement this as something that was content and team driven rather than feeling more ELA driven. We found that WordGen is an excellent resource, but it requires quite a lot of prep work to be done really well and to work as a collaborative team resource and be effective in its implementation. Student attendance, of course, like we said, winter break, we had a couple of snow days as well. This was an issue. And if they would miss a day of instruction, they would miss that skill practice with the words. And I think that would impact their full comprehension of each word throughout the week. In our data collection, though, we did 3 weeks. So we have 1.1, 02, and 03. So this is from the pre-test and post-test that Jen would have ran in her class. And you can see how each time their word comprehension skills did improve. So a total of 113 students would participate throughout these 3 weeks. Students had to define the word by analyzing the meaning from a sentence, and then questions for the pre-test and post-test were the same, so that it would be an equal measure. And then we compared the pre-test and post-test scores showing student growth. And our lowest score improved from a 0% to a 20%, and our highest score improved from a 40 to a 90. Yeah, a 40 to a 90. Yeah. And so, so for each week, what we did was count the number of samples that we had, and that for this left column. And then we counted the number of the word gen vocab words that were used in their writing samples. So the first week, most of the students would use 5 words. The second week, there was a lot of confusion happening. Some of us were out. Some of the students thought they didn't need to use all 5 words. So we saw a lot of 3s being used there. But then the third week, we saw that number 5 jump back up again. And so most students did well and improved overall using the words throughout.
Okay, so this is the result for the first week that we implemented word gen. You see on the left are pre-test scores. So we had as low as 0%, with most of our students scoring 80%. So there was 5 words, so 4 out of 5. And then at the end of the week, after they received the explicit instruction across all their core classes, our lowest score for first week was 20, and you see that we had a lot of students being able to use these words and analyze them in a sentence with 100%. So for our second week, our data shows growth as well. We went from some scoring 0 up to 100. Our mean score raised from 76% up to 82%, showing that more students were able to understand the words. And along with our third week, so we did have students score 0s and 20s, but by the end of the week, we had no students score in the 0 or 20%. So that third week, our students were able to all students were at least able to identify 2 of the words, 2 or more, and use it and analyze it and use it. So we saw our mean score go from 75% up to 90% with that last week of implementation. And this was looking just at the words. So we looked at the words in writing, but we also used it, like Jen said, for our pre-test and post-test in analyzing it and just not defining the words, but the test had if the word was used this way. So words like the word, and you had to choose which word went in. So kind of defining it, but again, using it in a sentence.
Replacement language arts class. So I teach 9th through 12th grade learning support. It is a smaller group instruction. We do the same like instruction with what the regular ed classes are doing, but it's a smaller group and just a little bit with more accommodations and more explicit instruction. So some accommodations that were made for this was they only had to use 3 out of the 5 words. And we were just making sure they really used the words correctly, you know, writing complete sentences, and just the proper grammar, punctuation, and all those types of things. But there was improvement as well with the replacement language arts classes with like from the pre-test to the post-test as well after the explicit instruction.
In 8th grade, we saw a lot of the same type of trends, improvement overall. Some of the students, and this was a great example, they used quotes from the research that they had done throughout the other classes. And also it seemed that having the debate in the history class and then having our writing sample done the next day really seemed to help them. So this student was able to really articulate their ideas clearly, use the words that were included in the 5 of the word gen, and then have their ideas expressed completely and use the words correctly as well. So it wasn't just them learning the definition, but again, like Nancy mentioned, and Julianne mentioned, being able to use the word in the correct context, even if they would have to change a prefix or suffix. So next steps, we want to continue to implement vocabulary instruction on a weekly basis. WordGen is a great way to do this, and we're finding other ways to incorporate it into the content that we're already teaching. And what we want to continue to do is try to use WordGen, schedule a vocabulary instruction within ELA, and then also across content areas. We found it to be really beneficial for the kids, especially once they got into the routine of doing it after week 1, week 2, when we had our snow days. But in week 3, we really started to see that improvement of growth for all of them. So we think that it's a really great resource we'd like to continue to work with. I think that's it. Yeah.
Oh my God, fabulous, fabulous. I'm over the moon again about this. Thank you for your full-on whole team commitment to this intervention. WordGen is excellent to select. And I have lots of positive things to say. One is my senses, and I could see you're just with your students on Unit 1, this was truly a new ambition, right? A new implementation. You rallied around WordGen and got it implemented within the time of our meeting after that first session. Is that right?
We had implemented it a few years ago with 7th and 8th grade, but then we hit COVID. And so after that, we stopped implementing it, but that was something that really inspired us to try it again. And we thought with it being across content, it would give us the most growth and data over that time.
Right.
Yeah, but
this was the first time these students saw the program, though, so the teachers
Yes.
with it.
Yes, and I think you made it when you presented that last slide, I think you said something very powerful, and it's something I sort of was bubbling in my mind a little bit, was that you will see continued familiarity with students with the program because of the routines. Word generation is so explicit and systematic. The routines are the same every day. They expect the same thing when they connect to a content area classroom. And as you build across units, you're going to have a shift in scores, I think, just because of the familiarity with routines. And you mentioned that the kids need to settle in. They need to learn the expectation of the 5 words and using the 5 total words in their writing, and learning support using the 3 words in their writing. And once they have that, I think you'll continue to see that improve. But I love the commitment that you have taken for that whole team approach across grades, including learning support. So it was wonderful to see that learning support example as well. I just love it. Love that you've gone that route. My other really positive thing is I love that you looked at the maturity of student writing with a subsample of your students. I think that can be very powerful if you not necessarily do it weekly, but dip in maybe once a month on a subsample and see how writing is looking across time. That really can, because you will then develop enough data to gauge how great a 21% is. You know what I mean? You'll have an increased and improved comparison to really understand that scoring within the context of the sample, your school sample, and can use that most powerfully. So I am really impressed that you did that piece. And I think really impressed that you did that subsample piece. I'm excited about it. So all lots of good things here too. And so again, my patent colleagues can jump in and add in more of their observations. Yeah, thank you for your presentation.
I have to leave, but I wanted to quickly say on behalf of Forest Hills, and I said it in the chat, and I want to make sure they know this, that you're one of our secondary MTSS teams in Pennsylvania that has been at this for a long period of time. And what your presentation substantiated is what we need in secondary MTSS, which is sustainable practices and a continued commitment to fidelity of implementation. And so just so happy to see that, WordGen is still alive and well, AKA writing, vocabulary, and comprehension, right? And to just do a shout out on behalf of your district as a model. You've got your board involved, you have really good leadership, and at the teacher level, the practitioner level, you all work so seamlessly. And it may not feel that way every day, but boy, do you really try and keep this whole effort on the front burner. So I just wanted to say on behalf of Baton that we've been so happy to see all that you've done, and not just in reading, writing, speaking, and listening, but also in mathematics, and then also in the behavioral and cell domain. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Thank you all three for coming and sharing that work. I guess then my question now is we'll transition and question to Pat, and we can conclude with 15 minute-ish of content right now, or we could take a break and then come back and I could pull it through the rest of our planned time. Do you have a preference of just rounding it out or taking that break and then concluding around 11:45? Let me know, and I'm flexible about how you'd like to steer that.
You think we'll be done at 11:45?
Or we could just, yeah, do you want me to conclude now? So I want to conclude our session today. Couple of things. One to note is I feel one of the things to pay attention to as you continue to add to your toolkit of strategies for core reading instruction is paying attention to that question and asking and answering piece. I know on our continuum of pathways, that's sort of the reach. That's where you get kids to work deeper with content, expand their ideas and connect their ideas. But to me, and what we've seen in the work with students is that's often the missing piece to get them to really analyze text with depth. And so in the presentation slides that I'm sharing today, there's a section on question asking and answering. It reviews the QAR strategy. And then there's some videos you can watch that you can see how that strategy is demonstrated in a classroom. And I think that's highly powerful and an important sort of chunk of content to look at. It includes a connection to assessment as well. Let me just pop in so you see some of those things in the slides, and you can know that that information is there. Hopefully you can see my slide sorter view at this time. If you look at slide 41, you'll see this section that begins getting into the question asking and answering content. And as I scroll down just a little bit, you'll see that QAR strategy represented for you. And then a couple of classroom snapshots included our YouTube video links where you're able to go and watch that classroom instruction. I love these because it can show you the application of the strategy if that's something you want to study. Also included, though, I want you to look at a couple of assessment examples where we're taking that QAR strategy of question asking and answering and aligning it with a rubric where you could actually score domains based on how proficient you think students are. So let me just review this. It's an information sharing that I want you to know. So in this case, the student is accurately identifying each of the 4 question types. So it's almost like you can give a point if they are doing well with the right there questions. Remember that right there questions are literal. You want students to be able to answer questions about text when the answer can be found right there in the book. You can give a point if students are doing well with think and search type questions, meaning that they are asked a question that requires them to find information in 2 different spots in the text. Maybe the first part of the paragraph and the second part of the paragraph, but the information is right there. I can underline it. I can circle it. It just happens to be in 2 different locations. Same paragraph, different pages, from a table, from a paragraph. That means think and search. On my own questions or questions that can be given to me where technically I really don't need the text at all to answer that question. So it could be, how would I feel if I was in this character's position or encountered this sort of dilemma? My answer could be better if I read the text, but technically I don't need it. And that would be, are kids doing well with those sorts of questions? And then finally, you could score a point if you're looking at students' author and me use question asking and answering, meaning that these are inferencing, right? This involves inferencing. So I need to understand the text, that is the author, what the author is saying, but I need to bring my own understanding to it to answer it. So author and me in the QAR schema and the structure are inferencing. And so in this sort of rubric for assessment purposes, you can evaluate student question asking and answering use. Can they ask these questions? Can they answer these questions? And essentially give 1 point to each of that use. The next domain is the students' responses. Do they demonstrate a close, careful reading of the text? There you can score 0 to 4 based on just not at all. They're not reading closely at all to they really are. And that's your 4 points. The student makes appropriate links to the text for in the book questions. So that means that they are finding those answers in the text, right? The student makes appropriate connections for in my head questions. And then finally, the student demonstrates reflective reading habits during class discussions, your connection right here. So I wanted to show you that if you implement a strategy like QAR, you can observe question use and be able to document it. The same here is applied for a different example of a rubric where you're looking at how students answer questions specifically. So you are just looking at how they respond to a question. And then there's a 4-point rubric that helps you evaluate at what level and what depth students are doing it. So these are provided for you if you want to study or entertain the idea of including the QAR question answer relationship strategy in your work. And the 2 rubrics I'm showing you were provided in the core reading resource packet that's available in the Google Drive for our sessions. It was shared in part 1 and those strategies are there. So reminding you that QAR has lessons that you don't have to write yourselves, that comes packaged if you want to try comprehension lessons that have already been written. They align with the evidence-based strategy we're talking about. And then on the far left is the QAR Now. I'll hold it up if you're watching my video too. The QAR Now text that's not very lengthy, but would be a great, for example, professional learning community book to guide your way through things. So just for a moment, before we continue on, I've identified 2 websites that help take this, I hope, comprehension strategy a little bit further or give you some support around that strategy. Additional support, including the classroom videos, so you can see what instruction looks like. One video is, I think, put together by an educator herself. She has a variety of comprehension strategies on her website. One of them is QAR. And then know about Reading Rockets if you haven't visited there or haven't visited there recently. Reading Rockets also profiles the QAR strategy. As you saw, the QAR strategy can be used with younger kids as well as our secondary learners. And so definitely view it from your secondary lens. I'm going to pause a couple minutes. If you'd like to copy and paste, I'm hoping my colleagues helping put these links in the chat box. If you like to take those links to the website so you can just view for a minute here the sorts of resources that are provided. I'll just give you a moment to explore those, not too long.
Lana, I'm not seeing these links on the document.
Oh, I'm sorry about
No,
that.
that's okay.
I'll put them in the chat. I'm happy to
I
do that.
apologize. Thank you.
Yep. No worries. I will get those right now. The first is comprehension strategies, and then I'll get the other one here. There you go. Yeah, just take a couple minutes and look into those, and then I'll keep going. Okay, so let me bring you back into my PowerPoint. Oops, just a minute. Yeah, I love the idea that you can build some sort of professional learning community discussion around QAR. I think it is the next step strategy for those of you who are trying to push kids into that deeper level of comprehension. And from a writing perspective, as I shared, connecting ideas, building on ideas, this questioning really drives that conversation, both in reading and writing discussion. So it's a good strategy to know about and keep in your toolbox. So to build out this content on question asking and answering, I wanted to conclude with the skill builders that I didn't have a chance to talk about in part one. There are 2 skill builders to reinforce when it comes to question asking and answering. And I will explain why these are so important. The first is related to making inferences. Inference making is very hard for some students. In main idea and detail, we're keeping them at a just level of understanding, right? And then in summarizing, we're pulling that information together and conveying the meaning of what was read. To really push your understanding in a deeper way, it involves making an inference. And I wanted you to see the simple formula of what inference making is about. So this can be used in your classroom. You can come back to the slide and make it lesson friendly, make it change the graphics, put words in instead of pictures. But I want students to understand that inference making is a formula. It has 2 parts. It aligns with what author and you questions are if you're teaching the QAR strategy. Inferencing means that I take something from the text and I have to add my own understanding to it. So I'm searching for clues, if you will, of what I know to connect it, to add to, right? To add to what the text is saying. And then that equals my answer. This, in a nutshell, is what inferencing is all about. So if students are having trouble responding to an inference level question, or even in their conversation and written expression, you're finding that they're not extending and applying, right? Application, applying, synthesizing, all is based on inferencing. I back them out of what they're reading and just work here with simple sections of text. Focus discreetly on how to make an inference. And this is the formula. Got to back it, back into it. And so it's what I read. It's taking something from the text that I can find, the author part. I can find what that author said is the writer of that text. But now added additively to it is my own understanding, things that I have to infer, and that gets my answer. Inferencing always involves this question asking, which is why it's here. It's part of inquiry. And if I'm in any kind of literature, in a literature domain, fiction, reading fiction texts with kids, I'm always asking, I'm pausing for text excerpts and asking students to interpret what happened. Sometimes it's exactly in the text, many times it is not. So I'm chunking my text and always pausing as I read, and I'm asking what happened? What happened in this section? What happened in this section? And you can see I've pulled that out a little bit as a strategy. Got a little bit of text that we're reading. Jill running up the street with her mom. She was crying and looking everywhere. She loved Fluffy so much. Jill was wondering if they would ever find her. There's tons of inferencing here. Who's Fluffy? Why was Jill running? Why was she crying? So I'm questioning. I'm going to pause and ask students just to look at that excerpt of text, and we're going to discuss what happened. We can apply the text. Look at my bottom slide there with the graphics. Apply the text. Jill was running up the street with her mom. That's the text. Now I could go apply what I know to that sentence and figure it out. Why was she running up the street? What do you think based on your background knowledge? Read a little more. She was crying and looking everywhere. Or I can take that chunk of text as a whole, read it. Jill was running up the street with her mom, so forth. She loved Fluffy so much, Jill was wondering if they would ever find her. And then ask what happened there. So take that excerpt of text, what happened, gets you to apply and think about your background knowledge. Same, I would model, think aloud, and then ask kids too, what happened? So you could do it very, very explicitly, but you're taking apart. The key for literature is to really ask about this, the what happened piece right there. With informational text, it's always asking for main idea and details, but you then add why and why. Why is this the main idea? And that is an inference. That's an inference. So I wanted to show you a question asking and answering rubric aligned with inference making. So you could actually evaluate how students are making inferences. This rubric is also in that resource packet that was provided in part 1, if you're looking for it. What we want students to do to get that full response, the full score of 4 on here, is to connect it to the text to justify an inference with text support. And here is where inferencing puts you on the edge of text-based analysis, which is really what I wanted to share. Question asking and answering is a skill that is required of students to do text-based analysis and to cite evidence in the text. And so if you look again closely at the rubric on your screen, you'll see that to really get a high score, you've got to provide support for it. You've got to provide the connection to the text. And so here's the layers of why question asking and answering is so important. So why I feel QAR is a nice foundational strategy, because you teach students generally how to work with question types, both how to ask them and how to answer them. And then when I look at inferencing and unpack it, I'm looking at that text-based support that's so important. I try, for those of you in learning support and supporting students who are receiving special education, to work out what an IEP goal might look like and how they connect to the state standards in Pennsylvania. So these examples are here. When you see on a rubric, I'm referring back to the rubric that I just shared with you. So finally, the second skill builder we didn't have time to go over, but I wanted to bring to you is what gets you over the edge. So finding inferences and making inferences puts you at the edge of text-based analysis. But now finding the evidence, finding that evidence and citing it is what's really key. And it thrilled me to see some, I think it was our first presentation, kind of go in that direction where you were using charts and things students were filling out to take it to that level of evidence. So you can frame this additional skill practice for students of, like, we're looking for the evidence. That's our whole objective here. Evidence is found in the text. And what students can do is they can note this, they can log it, they're note taking. Having students generate a question from the text, write the question, its answer, and the page number wherever the text is located. By having students write their own questions from the text, answering them and noting the page number, they are in the where's the evidence domain. So just take a look at this, for example. On the left-hand side is what I'm talking about. It's like call it a where the evidence log, where students can write that question, the answer, the page number, and look at that far right column, words in the text that help them answer that question. So what you are doing is you don't have to do a lot of questions this way. You just have students do 1 or 2 or 3 at most, right? Because you really want them to spend time constructing that question, answering it, logging the page number, and identifying words in the text that help support it. So really keep digging into that. This is about where do you cite the evidence? This is the practice and how questions bridge to that, right? How text-based analysis is question-driven and is based on students' ability to go through the process of the thinking that's represented by that I would say think sheet on the left. The prediction log, I'm pulling that from Sharon Vaughn and colleagues' text, where you can do it with predictions too. So prediction log would be a great thing if you're doing literature. My group that presented novels today, and that how you were doing the vocabulary units aligned to your novel focus study and those units. This is a great thing, making predictions, but showing how students are logging whether or not their predictions are holding up and citing page numbers. All about kids citing text-based evidence connects to the text. So like before, if you're interested, if you're in learning support or special education, want to come back and look at these examples, you certainly may here for IEP goals tied to the content. So I will pause here. We won't do a breakout, but I want you just to pause and make a few notes before I kind of summarize the day and the content presented over the last couple of sessions together. So just think about that question asking and answering piece. Do you have some big idea takeaways? Any notes about the QAR strategy that I can entice you to go back and look at or consider as a really important grounding strategy for then building inferencing, making later, building where the evidence work is later. So just any notes for yourself there. So now I'll move here into pulling it all together. A couple show and tell things and some websites to pay attention to, and then just to wrap it up. So I do want you to know about this foundational document, this promoting reading interventions for students in grades 4 through 6. Specifically, recommendation 3. Recommendation 3 to me pulls everything together that we've done in our sessions, part 1 and 2. Recommendation 3 from this guide, evidence-based recommendation, is to routinely use a set of comprehension building practices to help students make sense of the text. And that's exactly what we've done. So look at the sub-bullets here. Evidence-based practice is to build students' world and word knowledge so they can make sense of the text. Wow, all 3 presentations today tackled that first bullet and showcased it well. The second is to consistently provide students with opportunities to ask and answer questions to better understand the text they read. I just rounded that one out and filled in the gaps where we had to end based on our time together in part 1. The second is to teach students a routine for determining the gist of a section of text. That's just writing, main idea, detail, and summarizing. So we did address that. And teaching students to monitor their comprehension as they read. You know what? If we're doing number 1, 2, and 3, we are including and building in skills related to monitoring comprehension. So all of these work together to tie things up related to our core reading instruction, and with our lens adding, importantly, that written expression piece to the picture. We can't separate out the reading or core reading instruction from writing. Just for your knowledge, I pulled out of the providing reading interventions for students in grades 4 through 9 practice guide the lesson study that they gave as an example. What I wanted you to know, if you're really interested in this content, there's a fabulous example that pulls all of these recommendations together in a single lesson. And so do use that as your next steps if you want to have a discussion about what does a lesson look like when all of these core reading instruction strategies are integrated together in a lesson. So I wanted you to find the strategies in this lesson that we've been talking about. It's a great next step. Number 2, to look at this from the perspective of how partners are used. And I'm so happy a couple of the presentations leverage partners. partner work is important here, and you can look for it. And then finally, QAR isn't used as a strategy, but you can certainly go back and look at this lesson from that perspective. So it's really nice. Even with, you would see here, the time breakdowns are included in this. So I'm giving this to you as an assignment, which doesn't have to be completed by any stretch. But if I were to give you an assignment and we were coming back, I would like to look at this lesson with you and look at it from that perspective. Finally, out the door, there are some additional websites I just want to share as show and tell examples that I think if you are interested in this content, if you're interested in building a team around comprehension, around core reading strategies, both for word learning as well as content, great websites here. If you're not familiar with the Iris Center, check it out. There's a great module on secondary reading instruction, and it focuses on teaching vocabulary comprehension in the content areas. So for my last team who presented, who was using WordGen, that might be just a great enrichment module. Or if you're trying to scale this in the building, it might be something for professional learning that everyone sort of rallies around and watches to adjunct what you're doing with word generation. AdLit, everyone should know about AdLit. It's adolescent literature. It's a website that is a clearinghouse of strategies that we've been talking about to support adolescent literature, adolescent literacy development. It is run by WETA, the public television station here in the Washington, D.C. area, and they just celebrated a relaunch of AdLit, adolescent literacy, and you can go look at those classroom strategies. They've got lots there, including some videos to watch of things in practice. And then finally, I want you to know about the Meadows Center Adolescent Literacy Resource. This is phenomenal. It's basically a curated list of resources for adolescents to support adolescent literacy from the perspective of behavior, from the perspective of vocabulary and comprehension, and everything is basically listed with web links for you to go find resources to support this work. It's essentially a document that serves as a clearinghouse to help you find things. So if you're looking for additional resources, that's something to share. So my final pause and process and Justin, you have a minute to do it, but knowing where you're headed with this work is helpful. And I'm so happy the teams that presented today thought of where they're going next. And for those of you who didn't present today, think of where you're going next. How will you use the pathways presented? How will you think about word learning versus content as you support our adolescent readers and writers? So my conclusion is where we started, and that's what I want students to do, is to write about the text they read to demonstrate comprehension. And as we've discussed, that involves the two pieces, the word learning piece as well as the content piece. And hopefully at this point in time, you now have pathways on hand and some strategies that you can use to address problems and then support implementation. So that is just so thankful for all of you and those who shared today. Thank you. I'm going to continue with another part 1, part 2 series that focuses on macro level writing and the writing process. I'll be doing part 1 of macro level writing in February on the 16th. And then we'll have a similar part 2 to follow up with any implementation that folks have done. So anyway, thank you for today. See you soon. I'm going to turn things back over to my patent colleagues to wrap up our session.
Thank you, Dr. Santoro, for a wonderful presentation today. And we really do appreciate your support of our work here with secondary comprehension and then literacy in general. We were so excited about the implementation efforts of all of our presenting teams today, and it was with your support that we were able to get all that rolling. So it's evidenced in the work that's happening from research to practice. So we're just thrilled with everything that we were able to see today. So thank you so much for all of your support and efforts.